Begin the current Daf, Mesech Chagigah Daf Yomi. Begin the second line down at the top of the Yamid. We continue halacha the next Mishnah. Again, continuing on this theme we're discussing here from the beginning of the Mesechta, which is the title of this Mesechta. We're going to come as Chagigah and Re'iyah. Cheers, corresponds to Bakazich and the Cheskot, turning to Daf Chem, Mishnah is joining with today's Daf. Some things we're discussing today's Daf are Shlomim v'Oilos v'Smicha b'Yamtiv, whether it's permitted to bring a carbon Shlomim or a carbon Oil on Yamtiv, and whether one may perform a Smicha leaning on the animal on Yamtiv. Atzeres shechali is be'erev Shabbos. If Shavuos falls on a Friday, when does one bring the carbon Re'iyah? We stress that the Sunday after Shavuos, even if we're going to bring the carbonas, that it's not Yom Tov, to oppose the view of the Tzedukim, they held that Shavuos was always has to be Memachar as Shabbos, always has to be on the Sunday. That if one doesn't bring the Oilas Re'iyah or the Shalach Chagigah on Shavuos, he can still do so for the next 6 days. And Lina, one must stay overnight when being Oilul L'Regel. So we begin the current Daf Yomi, second line down at the top of the Yamah. We continue with the next Mishnah. Again, continue on the theme of the Chagigah and the Re'iyah. We have a machlekes, we mentioned already once before in this Mesechta, between Bishami and Beisil. Bishami, they say, Mevi and Shlamim. You're allowed to bring a carbon Shlam on Yom Tov, because that's for a person's eating. And then it says Lochem, and you're allowed to do Malacha for a person's own personal consumption. But even if you're going to bring the Shlamim, Ve'in Samchan Aleim. But you cannot lean on them. This is what we actually said in the previous stuff. We had this machlekes between the Nesim and the Abdezins for many generations. The first machlekes in Klal Yisrael was regarding if you lean on your carbon. Rather, what you do is you lean on it from before Yom Tov, and you slow down Yom Tov because Beis Shammai held that you don't need to have what's called tekiv l'smicha shlita. Although in the pasuk says v'shachat, it says v'samach v'shachat. You don't have to have it near each other. You can do smicha the day before and then do shchita the next day. But you don't do smicha because it's a issa d'rabbanan. Now, so you can bring the shlamim, but don't do smicha. Avaloi, but you cannot bring oilos, which, as Rashi explains, those oilos that could be brought after Yom Tov. Meaning there are certain oilos, of course, we bring on Yom Tov. You bring a carbon tamid, you bring a carbon basafin, because it has to be in that day. But those that can be brought after Yom Tov, that you cannot, because it says hu levadios lachem. Lachem means lachem lo legvaya. You cannot do malacha on Yom Tov for Hashem. That's Beis Shammai. So they say, no, Mevi and Shlamim va'oilos. Not only could you bring a Shlamim, you could bring the oilos, and b'sayim chalein, you could also lean on the carbon. Similarly, brings the Mishnah, the Gemara is going to discuss why you need both of these machlekes. Atzeres shechali is be'erev Shabbos. If Shavuos falls out to be on a Friday. They say, Yom Tevayach, the day of the slaughtering of the karbanos of the Re'iyah, and the Chagigah of Yom Tov, which Taisa discusses why would that be for the Chagigah too, the way Rashi explains, but ultimately he explains that it seems to be like that it's different than a regular shlamim, that even the Chagigah is saying Beis Shammai that it's going to be Achar HaShabbos. It's going to be after Shabbos, that you cannot sacrifice it, not on Yom Tov, not on Shabbos, although he said shlamim you could bring, but that wouldn't be by the Chagigah for some reason. Taisa tries to figure that out. But And what's interesting is that says Taisus, even though you weren't able to bring it on Yom Tov because you said you can't bring on Yom Tov, you can still bring it after Shabbos because even according to the one that says Tashlum Derishain, but you told me you can't bring it on Yom Tov, but since it's not held back because of the person, this is because of the day, so that we explained in the beginning of the Mesechta, Taisus says that that's still considered that you are eligible. So you can't bring it on Yom Tov, and you can't bring it on Shabbos, so you bring it after Shabbos. Well, they say no, no, it doesn't have a day of slaughtering, meaning you don't have to have a special day for slaughtering it after Shabbos because you're allowed to sacrifice the Oila and the Shlamim on Yom Tov. And the Geshe takes out the words Achar Shabbos. Now, Umayt and Beisil agree, however, Shemchali is b'Shabbos, if Shavuos falls on Shabbos itself, the Shem Tevayich Achar Shabbos. Beisil, of course, agrees that you cannot bring karbanas, your own private karbanas on Shabbos. Yom Tov, they hold that the Lochem does not exclude the Gevaya. You're allowed to do malachas avochal nefesh on Yom Tov. On Shabbos, you don't have that heter, so the day of the slaughtering obviously would have to be on the second day after Shabbos. But when you're doing this Yom Tevayach on Sunday, ain't Kohen Gadol mislabish b'kelim. The Kohen Gadol does not wear his beautiful clothing in his house and in the street, which Rashi holds. It's not talking about the time of the Avodah. We're not talking about Big Day Kahuna. We're talking about Stam. He shouldn't have his fancy kapata on this Yom Tevayach because when it's this Yom Tevayach is Sunday after Shavuos, we want everyone to understand that today is not a Yom Tov. That's what Rashi explains. So he says a few difficulty because the wording doesn't really sound like that. Shouldn't say Bekalov, it should say Bekalim Noim. Kalov sounds like as if his designated, and also why would you be talking about the Kohen Gadol? Every single person knows so. So what's the Kohen Gadol? We don't want anyone wearing the frock or the Zadna Shtram, Bekeshem with the Shtram. So Tais actually disagrees. He says, no, actually talking about the Shmoyne Begadim, the 8 garments that the Kohen Gadol wears, where on Yom Tov the Kohen Gadol would come with his, although every day he could do that, but especially on Yom Tov he would come with his Shmoyne Begadim. It was like a cover for the Yom Tov. Don't do it. Don't wear those garments. And don't do that because one people, as the Mishnah explains, say he shouldn't be wearing his garments, whether it means is like Rashi says, in the street he shouldn't walk around, or let's say the Kohen Gadol shouldn't wear his Shmoyne Begadim to do the Avodah, because he only did that really on Yom Tov primarily. And moreover, on this Yom Tevayach, the day that actually everyone's going to be bringing their Karbanos, Shalmei Chagigah, and Eilis Re'iyah on this Sunday after Shabbos when Shavuos was, you're allowed to have Hespedim, you're allowed to have a Tainus of fast. Why? Although really technically it's like a Yom Tov Bazaar, everyone's bringing their Karbanos. Because we don't want to fulfill the ones who said that Atzeres Achar Shabbos, the Tzedukim, they said that it says, oh, the Machras Shabbos, and that's when you Shavuos is the day after Shabbos, which really doesn't mean Shabbos. It as the Gemara elsewhere explains, that means from after Pesach you count 7 weeks, not after the Shabbos, and Pesach is called Shabbos. But to exclude from the understanding of the Sadducees, we specifically don't let it look like a Yom Tov, because we don't want to reinforce their mistaken belief that it's true, Shavuos has to be on a Sunday. It's not true. Now, the Gemara introduces that's going to relate back to the halacha of the Mishnah. I'm going to belaz on Rabbi Shloimy. It says, "Minayin latzeres sheish lo tashum mikol shiva." Where do we know that you can make up the karbanos of Shavuos, the Shalmei Chagigah, the Osriya, all 7 days? Remember, the Shavuos itself is a 1-day Yom Tov. How do you know you can bring the karbanos of the Yom Tov for 7 days? It says the Gemara Shloimo, it says the pasuk in the bar. It says v'chaga matzos, v'chaga Shavuos, v'chaga Sukkos. It talks about the Shalosh Regalim, Pesach, Shavuos, and Sukkos. Now, why is it saying them all in the same pasuk? Makash Chagigah Shavuos, l'Chagigah Matzos. It wants to compare the Yom Tov of Shavuos to the Yom Tov of Pesach. Chagigah Matzos yesh lo tashum mikol shiva. Just like Pesach, you can make up the carbon all 7 days, which, as the Gemara said on the parak in the first parak of Testament Aleph, where we actually had a riboy by Chagah Sukkos, and the same thing applies to Pesach because it's also for 7 days. So just like we have a riboy from Sukkos and Pesach, so too Yom Tov is going to have Tashlum in all 7 days, and that's why it says in the same pasuk. Says the Gemara, wait a second, who said Tashlum is only 7 days? Maybe say compare it to the Yom Tov Sukkos. Just like Sukkos, we know that you can make it up all 8 days. It goes till Shmini Atzeres. So maybe Shavuos also you should be able to make it up for 8 days, not just 7 days. Says the Gemara, no, it's not the same Yom Tov. Shmini Atzeres is its own Yom Tov. So you can't bring your raya to Shavuos, which is doesn't have 2 Yom Tovim like Sukkos. There's just 1 Yom Tov, therefore it'd be like Pesach, only 7 days. Says the Gemara, what do you mean? When did we say that Shmini Atzeres is its own Yom Tov, and therefore you're saying you can't compare it? That was only said regarding the acronym of Pei Zayin Reish, Kuf Shin Beis. What does that mean? So Rashi says those are words of pious, lottery, Zman, Shechiyanu, Regel, the Yom Tov, Carbon, the Carbon, Shiur is the song, and the Beis is the Bracha. What does that mean? So Rashi goes through in detail. It says the lottery, the pious, the pay, is regarding what's called the Pari HaChag, regarding all the bulls of the Yom Tov. I mean, all the 7 days of Sukkot, they wouldn't do any lottery because there were so many karbanos. Rather, they would go according to the order of the Mishmaros, so the groups according to that order, they would sacrifice as the Mishnah teaches them the Sukkot of the name of base. Someone who brought the parm today would not bring it tomorrow. Now, the thing is, by the par, the bull that was brought on Shmini Atzeres, they would make a lottery. And which one of the Shmaros should bring it, because it didn't go according to that order, so that's the pay. That was different, Shmini Atzeres from Sukkot. The Zayin Zman is Shechiyanu, that you make a Shechiyanu Shmini Atzeres, although the rest of the days of Pesach, of Sukkot you're not. And Regel means that it has its own name as a Yom Tov. I mean, you don't call it Sukkot, you call it Shmini Atzeres. The Kuf is carbon, that the animals that are karbanos, according to the order of Sukkot, where they keep on getting less and less, and their lambs are always 14, and the rams are 2. Whereas in Shmini Atzeres, there's 1 bull, 1 ram, and 7 lambs. So it had a different order, the karbanos. The shin is a shiur, is that the song of the Karbanas is not like the order of the songs of Sukkot, where it doesn't talk about the parashas of Humvahi, as the Gemara says in Sukkot Navnei Marav, which was assigned for the songs of the Masachag, which Rashi also tells us he doesn't know what exactly the song is, but Taisa brings that the shiur would be the combination of 2 days, which is split up in Sukkot, that actually it was one whole mizmor on Shmini Atzeres, or another pshat is that it's actually like where it says Lamatzeach ala Shminis. That Lamatzeach would be the ala Shminis that would be appropriate. That was what was sung on Shmini Atzeres, but it was different than the rest of the theme of the rest of Sukkot, which all talk about the different things. The Beis is bracha that they would bench the king. That recalls what was by Shlomo Melech, where it says in Malachim Aleph, "V'yem Shmini shilach esam v'yivorchas HaMelech." That on the 8th day, which was Shmini Atzeres, he sent them away and they blessed the king. That's what the Beis that was only unique about Shmini Atzeres. But Taisus brings different interpretations. They have difficulties with Rashi interpretation for a few different reasons. Rabbi Tam says no. The Beis of bracha is that it's in Birchas Hamazon and in Tefillah, those brachas of Shemona Esrei, you mentioned Shmini Atzeres. That's what bracha means. Not that they bench the king. And regel means lina, the obligation that you have to stay overnight in Yerushalayim. Rabbi Nachanel explains that regel is regarding avelis, that we know, as the Gemara says in Moed Katan, that when a person is avel and then it passes Sukkot and then Shmini Atzeres, it's already like the day before Yom Tov is like 7 days, Sukkot is like 7 days, and Shmini Atzeres is like 7 days. You see, regel, it's like its own Yom Tov, that it's like another 7-day period. So we have a few different interpretations. Al Kol Panim, either way you learn this, the Gemara is saying it's only for these 6 things that we're saying that Shmini Atzeres is on Yom Tov. Lin Tashlum, regarding making up the carbon of the first days, Tashlum Derishon, whoever agrees that it's considered a continuation of the first days of Yom Tov to make it up. Now, like in the Mishnah Daf Tes, the Mishnah said, if someone did not bring his carbon Chagigah on the first day of Yom Tov, Chagigah is called Yom Tov Achron. He could bring it the whole Yom Tov and the last day of Shmini Atzeres. So why can't we learn the Shavuos and Sukkot? Says the Gemara, well-known Talmudic dictum, tefasta meruba like tefasta. To grab a lot, you don't grab. Tefasta mu tefasta, you grab a little, then you grab. What does that mean? Wherever you have 2 paths, one is to grab a lot and one is to grab less. Better grab the less, because even if you should have grabbed the more and you grabbed the less, okay, whatever you took, because in the more is obviously the less. But if you grab the more and you should have taken less, comes out that you grabbed inappropriately and you didn't do the right thing, which it turns out that your calculation was right. This brings a different interpretation, but it doesn't really like that. But that's what, in general. So therefore, if we're going to compare Shavuos to Sukkot or the Pesach, we're going to pick the Pesach because that's 7 versus 8.
Maybe you have a pilcha that Shavuos is 1 day Yom Tov and Sukkot and Pesach are 7 days. That's why there's Tashluim, because you have 7 days Yom Tov. Shavuos you don't have 7 days Yom Tov, therefore you can't have Tashluim.
Right, and that would be the pashtus, but then why are you comparing it? Why are you putting in the same pasuk? In the Chanami, you would say that it wouldn't have because it's not a Yom Tov. But here, when it's saying B'chagamas, B'chag Shavuos, B'chag Sukkos, it's comparing it. So we know it's comparing it. The question is which one? So we're going to say Tafasta Mu'at Tafasta. But then the Gemara says, okay, then why does the pasuk that mentions Sukkos, if you're only comparing it, what are you learning out from that? You're only comparing Shavuos to Pesach. Oh, says the Gemara, that's like Kushim Chagamatzis. We're mentioning Sukkot to compare it to Pesach, which is Ma Chagamatzis telling just like Pesach. You have to sleep out. You sleep overnight till after the day of Yom Tov, till Matzah Yom Tov. Chag Sukkot to Lina. So 2 Sukkos we're comparing to Pesach that also requires to stay overnight. Tais discusses what Lina is. Is it for the Yom Tov? Is it for the carbon? But there's a chiv of Lina. Says Gemara, what do we know by Pesach that there is a chiv of Lina that you're comparing it to Sukkos? That's what it says. In the bottom. It says if a Nisiva Baker, you're going to turn in the morning, which is which morning? The day of Chalamayid. Because Rashi says if you would think it's Yom Tiv, you would have a problem about Tchumen, which obviously you're not leaving the first morning of Yom Tiv because you can't go. You have a limitation of Tchum, which Tais discusses that we don't seem to be Rabbi Kiva. Maybe Rabbi would hold Yud Beis Milan. It's not true. They don't hold to that. Tais has a discussion regarding, but Al Kapanim, they leaving in the morning, they go back to 10. Obviously, you have to stay. You have to spend the night and be there, and that's what we're comparing that of Pesach to Sukkot. And Sukkot also has the chiv of Lina. Now the Gemara asks, we said that Shavuos you could have a tashlumin for 7 days, and the reason why we brought it in because it relates right back to the halacha of the Mishnah. The Gemara asks, one of the cases we mentioned in the Mishnah was Shavuos that falls out to be on the Friday. So B'Shamai they say Yom Tov Achar Shabbos. Okay, the day of the slaughtering is after Shabbos because they held you can't do it on Yom Tov. You obviously can't do it on Shabbos. So 3 days later, on Sunday, is when you do the Yom Tov. But they say Ein Lo Yom Tov. No, it doesn't have a day of slaughtering. Says the Gemara, the way the Gemara is reading it, my love, isn't it saying Ein Lo Yom Tov Klal? It doesn't have a day of slaughtering. If you did, Beis Hillel hold you could do it on Yom Tov. But the Beis Hillel are saying if you did not sacrifice on Yom Tov, no, B'Shamai, we don't agree to you at Sunday's Yom Tov. You can't make it up. So you see, it's not like the halacha that we were saying that it has Tashlum Kol Shiva. Says Maloi. That's not what Beis Hillel is saying. It's in the Tzricha Yom Tov. You don't need a day of slaughtering. But of course you do have. You just don't need it because you're bringing in Yom Tov itself. Says wait a second. Then the Ma'ikam Hashmalan. Then what's Beis Hillel telling us then? The Mekrabin B'Yomei. Obviously, when he's saying you don't have a Yom Tov, means he's just saying you don't need to, because he's saying that you're allowed to sacrifice it on the day of Yom Tov itself. Well, this in our own Mishnah, in the Reish of the Mishnah, we already had the same machlekes. Did none. Mishnah said, opening words of our Mishnah, Anom and Aleph, B'Shamai, the B'Shamai say, B'Mevi'in Shlamim, you could bring Shlamim, but you cannot lean on them, because that's a Issa D'Rabbanan, a B'Mishtamish B'Behema. But you can't bring oilers at all because it's lechem v'lo legvayim. Basically, they said no, Mevi'in Shlamim, you could bring the Shlamim, v'oilers and oilers, but you can lean on them. Isn't that the machlekes you tell me in the Seif of the Mishnah? Why you bring another case regarding Shavuos on Friday? That if you tell me Beis Hillel is telling you a big chiddush that Atzeres does not have a Tashlum Kol Shiva, great. That's what saying Ein Lo Yom Tov. There's no day of slaughtering, no, you can't make it up. But you tell me no, Beis Hillel, because you could. It's just Beis Hillel come and tell you that no, you can bring it on Yom Tov. So isn't this what you already said in the Reish of the Mishnah that Bechlal Halacha of Yom Tov, if you could bring your karbanos or not? And Beis Hillel you could bring your oila, and B'Shamai held that you cannot. So why are you repeating it again on Shavuos that falls out on Friday? If everyone holds you could do Tashlumin, so what's the machlekes? It's the same machlekes. Says the Tzricha is necessary because the Ashmin Baha, and this is similar to the remark that was just made before. The Ashmin Baha, if we would say it only the Reish of the Mishnah, that in general, oilas re'iyah on let's say regular Yom Tov. I would say, but how come in Beis Shammai? That's what Beis Shammai say. You're not allowed to bring it on Yom Tov. Because Yom Tov continues for 7-8 days. You can make it up tomorrow. But over here, that on Shavuos that falls out to be on a Friday, it might be Beis Hillel. I would say Beis Shammai agrees to Beis Hillel, and that you should be allowed to bring it on Yom Tov because tomorrow's Shabbos, and you're not going to bring the carbon. And once you're giving up already because you didn't bring it on Yom Tov, you didn't bring it Shabbos, you're going to be negligent. You're not going to bring it anymore. So then they might Lula Beis Hillel, I would say that they agree to Beis Hillel. Therefore we have to say that no, even when Shavuos is on Friday, and you're not going to bring it on Yom Tov, you're not going to bring it the second day of Shabbos, that's still, then we're going to not have you bring it on Yom Tov, you're going to bring it on the third day. V'yashmin b'ha, and have we only said the second case of when Shavuos is on Friday, I say, but how come Beis Hillel? Maybe that's only where Beis Hillel says mutter sh'ndlei shlomacha, because you can't bring it today, you're not going to bring it tomorrow, and people are going to forget about it, become negligent. Regarding a regular Yom Tov, I would say that maybe they agree to Beis Shammai that you cannot bring a Yom Tov, bring it the day after, and that's not such a negligence because it's the day after. They have to say both cases to say that no, they both disagree in both cases that either way you could or you could not bring a Yom Tov. It doesn't make a difference if it's a regular Yom Tov or if Shavuos is falling on Friday and you won't be able to bring it not only Yom Tov but even the following day on Shabbos. The Gemara says Tashma. The Gemara has another question on this halacha that you're saying Shavuos says Tashlum and Kol Shiva from the following brayso. Brayso says Mishla Chag Shabbos Yimei Pesach. If someone did not bring his karban Chagigah all the 7 days of Pesach or Shmonis Mechag or 8 days of Sukkot, or B'Yom Tov, and the Girsa takes the word Harishan because it's the same thing, but either way B'Yom Tov Shalatzes because there is only one day, and the Yom Tov of Shavuos. Shuven Chagig. If you didn't bring it on the Yom Tov, you can't bring karban Chagigah anymore. My love, isn't it saying Yom Tov Shalatzes? It seems to be clear that it's only on the Yom Tov itself that you can bring it, and you told me that this Tashel Mikol Shiva. Says Yimaloi, no, when it says if you did not bring it on the Yom Tov Shavuos, it means Yom Tebayach. If you didn't bring it on the day of the slaughter. Says the Gemara, if that's the case, then you should resolve and say that there's only one day of the slaughtering because it's saying in the singular, Yom Tov Shalateres is the day. You're saying the day of slaughtering. So how can you tell me the 7 days of Tashlumin? There should be one day of Tashlumin. And it says the Gemara, no, you made Tebayach. When it says the Yom Tov Shavuos, it means not just a singular day. We're calling it a Yom Tov, but it refers to the days in plural of slaughtering that you could do that for 7 days, not just for 1 day. So that doesn't refute what we said. Goes says Tashma to bring another question. The Tanya Rabbi Shloimy, he taught a brayso as follows. The way our gear says, Rabbi Shloimy finds difficulty with this, but Amr Torah, the Torah says Menei Yomim. You should count days, meaning 30 days, and the Kiddush Chaydish. And then you should sanctify the month by bringing a Musaf. Now, at the same time, Menei Yomim, you should also count days which are 50 days, and you sanctify Shavuos with its karbanos. So we compare the two, which they're both counting days, and then ultimately bring a carbon when you're finished that counting. Ma Chodesh, just like the month, Reish Chodesh, its sanctity is with one of Limnuyav, one of its countings, meaning just like you count the days, and then when you finish, the sanctified day is one of those units, which are days. Avatar, so to Shavuos, its sanctity is going to be with one of Limnuyeha, with one of what units of that you use to count. Now, my love, isn't it saying Gama Mechaydish, that you're learning out from Rish Chaydish, Machaydish Emechad, just like the Rish Chaydish is one day, Avatar Emechad, so to Shavuos is one day, because that's what it is. The units that you use to count up to that day are days. So, like you did for Rish Chaydish, so that's going to be the same thing for Shavuos. So, isn't it clear that Shavuos is only one day and not 7 days? Rava says, V'tizber, is it logical what you're saying? You think for Shavuos we only count days, Shavuot Lamaninan? We don't count weeks? But Abaya tells himself this Menacha is mitzvah lemimni yomiyat. There's a mitzvah to count days, and Svira Sa'imer. The Silik says the Pasam Yikra. Tis B'rucham Yishmim should count 50 days. But a mitzvah lemimni Shavuos doesn't mitzvah count weeks, as we do. Hayayim Chamisha Asa, right? And you count the Shehem Shtei Shavuos v'Yom Echad La'imer, right? We count the weeks and the days. So what are you asking? And the reason is because the Chsib, it says a pasuk in the bottom, Sheva Shavuos Tisbel, 7 weeks you should count for you. So the units are also weeks. So therefore, the Yom Tov could be a week. But moreover, Chag Shavuos Ksiv, it's actually called the Yom Tov of Shavuos, which means weeks. So therefore, it's not difficult. It could be the Tashlumi will be one of its units, which is not just a day, which is also a week. So the primary Yom Tov is a day, but at the same time, the Tashlumi will be a week. Or another approach, the Beit of Elazar ben Yaakov Tani, he says, how do we know that there is halach of Tashlumin for Shavuos for 7 days? Amakra. Pasuk V'Yikra. It says ukurasim. And the pasuk there is talking about Shavuos. It says ukurasim be'etzem hayom hazeh. You're going to call out on the essence of this day, and it says near that the word of ukutzechem, and that you're going to harvest is katsir artzechem. So it sounds like as if you're going to call it a mikra kodesh, and then you're going to harvest. So says the Brisa, Ezel chag shatar kayu de'bekotze. But what yom tov do you have that you're calling it a yom tov, and then you're harvesting? Havaim is a chag says. That would tell us that Shavuos, where because those psukim are talking about Shavuos. Now Amos, when are you doing this? If it's on Yom Tov itself, are you allowed to harvest on Yom Tov? That's a malacha that doesn't have a heter b'echel nefesh. Obviously, it's in the makeup period, which is after Yom Tov, which we're calling it mikra kodesh regarding the fact that you could do tashlumin, and yet it's permitted by malacha because it's not Yom Tov. So you see that the Yom Tov continues for a period when you're allowed to do malacha, which is the period of tashlumin that you see you have tashlumin for Shavuos. Now, so the Gemara explains. Which was the source that we knew Tashlumin from Amud Aleph, that we learned it from Chag Matzos and Chag Shavuos. Still, it's of Rabbi Shloimy Schwartzberg. You need to have this last teaching we just brought from Rabbi Shloimy Schwartzberg. Why? Because even Rabbi Shloimy Schwartzberg had only the teaching from Amud Aleph. Having been able to said, yeah, Ma Tashlumin shel Chag Matzos, as someone had asked this. Yeah, what I mean, you make up if you're comparing it to Pesach. Well, Asabas is Malacha, and that's a Yom Tov. That should be forbidden to do Malacha after Shlumei Atzeres. Now Asabas is Malacha. So then, if you're saying you can make up the carbon of Shavuos for 7 days, you should also be forbidden to do malacha, just like you're learning out from Pesach. That says clearly that you're doing kitzida, it's obviously not a Yom Tov. Now, if even Yaakov, you only had the second teaching, as we continue with Chazim Aleph, lo yadan nekama. I wouldn't know how many days about Tashlumin. It just says that you can do kitzida, even though you already called it a mikra kodesh. If you need the first teaching from Amud Aleph to say just like Chag Matzos is 7 days, so to Shavuos is 7 days. You can do anytime. So